Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier. Now, in my last presentation, looking at the trigger to the Civil War, the White Terror, I said it takes two sides fighting to make a civil war. Well, in this presentation, we'll take a look at how the communists desperately scrambled to fight back. And it really was a desperate affair for them. Chiang's attempt to smash the CCP almost succeeded. The CCP was almost wiped out, its ranks decimated, its organisational structure broken. Communication between the surviving army units and local party organisations was exceedingly difficult. A directive, or indeed a reply, could take months to reach its intended target. Similarly, communication between Moscow and Shanghai was desperately poor. It made it very difficult for the leadership to coordinate strategy, impose discipline, or indeed to have meaningful debate. The communists were physically splintered into three groups. The party leadership, who continued the battle from Shanghai, which became the headquarters of the CCP, those who continued the fight in the countryside amongst the peasantry, for example Mao, and Moscow and the Comintern, with representatives of the Comintern on the ground in China. Each was committed to the cause. Each wanted a socialist revolution. Each was brave. All this is beyond question. But each would have a different perspective on what was unfolding in China, a different perspective on reality. Added to this already explosive cocktail, one can add the final ingredient: fiercely strong personalities and their delicate egos. So as each pushed their favoured policies, their favoured tactics, there was a lot of confusion. In the wake of that initial onslaught, a lengthy meeting of the Comintern's plenum in Moscow resulted in a telegram to the Chinese from Stalin that was received on June 1st, 1927. In it, Stalin now urged the Chinese to adopt a more radical stance, to instigate an infusion of new blood from peasants and workers at the top of the Kuomintang party, to end all links with Chiang, and to form a dependable army of their own, and to lead an agrarian revolution. It all served to show just how out of touch Stalin was with the conditions in China. The CCP was no longer in any position to dictate to the Kuomintang how their party should be run. Whilst only a year earlier, Moscow had refused a request of 5,000 rifles for the communists, so that they could form an army of their own, lest it unsettle the alliance with the Kuomintang. Moscow, Shanghai and Mao could not agree on whether the party should play the leading role, defending what territory was held and adding to it when they could, or whether they should play a supportive role, responding to support insurrections initiated by peasants in the countryside or workers in the towns. Another key issue that was fiercely debated was whether the revolution should focus primarily on the workers and focus on taking control of towns, or would the revolution succeed first in the countryside, and only then would the towns fall into their hands. And what tactics should their armies adopt? Should they disperse and conduct a flexible guerrilla program? Or should they consolidate their forces and build bases from which the revolution could spread? All of this was the focus of fierce debate. And all these debates were conducted as the White Terror raged around them, as they suffered terrible setbacks, faced the most incredible odds. all of which meant that attempts to resist and fight back, 8 areas were chosen for the fight back to begin, only added to their losses and made survival less certain. The autumn harvest uprising in Hunan in 1927, led by Mao but not entirely controlled by him, was one such failure. Though he was denied the military support he requested, Mao was criticised, accused of military adventurism, and removed from both the Politburo and the Hunan Provincial Committee. There were changes at the top of the party's leadership too. The most critical lesson learned was the importance of military power if political objectives were to be achieved. The lessons of Sun Yat-sen, the warlords, Chiang Kai-shek and the Northern Expedition, and most painfully the White Terror, all pointed to the fact that the military struggle, and so an army, would be the only means by which a socialist revolution could be achieved in China. So grew the Maoist maxim, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Mao had come to this conclusion at the planning stage of the autumn harvest uprising, only to be thwarted by the party leadership, who placed popular insurrection before military force. Armies would only be used to consolidate the gains of the peasants, accusing him of a lack of faith in the masses. In the wake of the failed uprising, Mao also concluded that the peasantry needed leadership, not from bourgeois landlords, which was the case in the uprising, but from officers trained by the party. The party had to be a political party and an army too. But despite the overwhelming failure of the insurrections, the party persisted in supporting uprisings, all of which failed. The debate took a new twist, however, when the CCP's 6th Party Congress took place in October 1928 in Moscow. It was deemed too dangerous to hold it in China, with Chiang's White Terror raging, though it was also convenient for the Russians, who could now more easily control its conclusions. And its conclusions leaned towards those of Mao, though as he was fighting to survive in Jinggangshan in the Hunan Mountains, he didn't hear of them for a full 6 months. It was accepted that the party had overestimated the ability of the peasants and workers to mount insurrections, and had also underestimated the powers of the reactionary forces. China was still in the midst of a bourgeois revolution, and so the party's historic task was to rid China of the imperialists, destroy the landlord system, and set up Soviets, so as to give peasants and workers the experience of government, and so lay the groundwork for the socialist revolution that would follow. Insurrections would not succeed. Indeed, Bukharin, who oversaw proceedings, went as far as to say they were damaging, in that their repeated failure lowered morale. Military power was accepted as critically important, and so the Red Army was seen as the central issue. The peasantry was seen to hold the most revolutionary potential, and it was agreed that guerrilla tactics should be adopted in order to establish Soviets. And as we have seen, 2 sides fighting now, and we are moving to the tactics the communists would adopt in the Civil War, I'll stop. Don't forget, there's my website, History Made Easier. That's there to help you too. But for now, let me end by thanking you for listening, and by wishing you the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.